Hey, you're here with Dr. Jodi, and this is season 2 of Anxiety. I am so done with you. This podcast is a teen and young adult guide to ditching toxic stress and hardwiring your brain for happiness. If you're new here, grab a copy of my book, Anxiety, I'm So Done With You, because this series is following section by section through the book, going a little bit deeper, giving more examples, and telling more stories. Season 2, which follows along with Chapter 2, is going through the lies that anxiety, depression, and negative thinking tell you to get you to believe them. Once you know what they are, you can see them coming a mile away and call them out. That way they can no longer sucker punch you with their toxicity. I appreciate you for listening, subscribing, and leaving me 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. If I've helped you at all, spread the word about this book and this podcast series. Mental health problems are invisible, so you never know who is struggling around you, and you sharing can make a huge difference in their lives. Welcome to this podcast. We're talking about Chapter 2, lie number 4. You must be in control. If you've been along on this journey with me from the beginning, you know the correlation between control and anxiety. So you know control issues are anxiety issues. In this episode, we're going to unpack control a little bit further. We'll talk about vulnerability and distinguish physical vulnerability with emotional vulnerability. We'll unpack danger and how you know you are in it. We'll go over pseudopower, where I tell you why it is not sustainable, and I'll share why letting go is not what you think it is. Let's dive in. How many of you can relate to the anxious thought that I quoted at the beginning of this section? If I'm not in control and something bad happens, then I can't do anything. This thought decidedly makes you think that you need to be in control at all times. Control makes people feel safe, but when they have an expectation that they need to be in control, it is consuming because so many things that they are experiencing and interacting with are out of their control. We humans are constantly being reminded that we are failing this expectation to keep control because it's an impossible expectation. And even though the expectation is impossible to meet, not meeting it feels dangerous and so completely unacceptable. Again, this happens implicitly. Remember from the last episode, implicit means it's there and it's impacting things, but you may not be conscious of it. When we feel out of control, we try to grab something near us to control so that we feel in control again. In fact, we try to grab whatever we could put our hands on. Cleanliness, other people, substances, anger, perfection, sex, exercise, whatever is close at hand. And when controlling that calms us a bit, we keep grabbing that thing again and again. The problem is, it's unsustainable. I call us trying to control these things pseudo-power or pseudo-control, because it doesn't satisfy us and we have to keep grabbing it. Bullies, or people who engage in power tactics in relationships, are playing this out. Getting power over others is their way of trying to regulate their implicit anxiety. They feel out of control and compensate by controlling something or someone. Did anyone ever tell you that hurt people hurt people? This is what they mean. Bullying others comes from a pain or an anxiety in the bully's life. That doesn't make it okay that they hurt you, but it can help you understand that it's not you and you don't have to put up with it anymore. In fact, if there's some sirens going off as I say this, check out my red flags video on the blog post for this episode. That'll tell you if anything that you are experiencing is something to be concerned about. The link is in the show notes. In Chapter 3, I go deeper into finding out real sustainable empowerment. But for this section, I'm mostly addressing the expectation that you have to be in control, because that unrealistic expectation hurts you. In your implicit belief system, control has come to equal safety. This has led to the belief that vulnerability equals danger. These concepts have small relationships to each other, but they are in a context of so many other things. They are not equal. Control is relative. There are things that you have control over and things that you don't have control over. Anxiety calls your attention to the things that you have no control over, making you think that they are so much more impactful than they are. Anxiety makes them feel like they're real threats, when the things you do have control over, your agency or your response, means more to how good your life is than anything else. This is why I dedicated the whole chapter 3 to your agency. Anxiety likes to spin the tale that you are out of control when you're not. Anxiety is rigid. It makes you think that everything should go as you expect, or you're out of control. For example, when someone changes a plan, you feel like the whole thing's falling down around you and your anxiety spikes. Changing plans could be for the better or benign, or even if it's not, the other person might give you notice ahead of time, communicate well with you the reason which makes sense to you, and suggest an acceptable alternative. None of that is out of control. Even if someone tells you last minute, you could decide what to do next. You're still in control of what you do. Vulnerability is not dangerous. If you've grown up in a chaotic household where you experienced some insecurity in any form, you have probably learned that vulnerability is dangerous. When I worked in a preschool for kids who are at risk of being removed from their homes because of abuse and neglect, we noticed an interesting phenomenon. When one of the preschoolers were crying, the other kids would come up and hit them. Vulnerability was not tolerated. If you ever spent time with someone who grew up in a chaotic environment, for example, they had a parent who was selfish or abusive or was not emotionally available, or they had a significant loss or trauma, extreme poverty, housing instability, or a caregiver who is misusing substances, you might have noticed that they get panicked, angry, or play devil's advocate when you're vulnerable. To them, vulnerability means danger. But vulnerability is only dangerous when there is danger there. Vulnerability, when you're safe, is not only safe, it's beautiful, intimate, connecting, transformative, and for that reason, very often inspiring. It's important to delineate physical threat with emotional threat. The sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight reaction, is practical when you're in physical danger, not when you're in emotional danger. Taking a moment to observe your situation and make this distinction can save your mental health. In the book, I talked to you about Kate and her pulling back from everything because she was so afraid of being vulnerable. Her fear was understandable because she was abused in a previous relationship. That guy who abused her, I'm glad she pulled away from him. However, her isolation and anxiety hurt her so much more than the risks from being around new friends, coworkers, and classmates. There are good people out there, but she didn't believe that she could know the difference because she had gotten herself into that one bad relationship. But I argued that she did have the skills of noticing people. She could have small interactions with them and know pretty quickly if she was physically safe in the vicinity of them. And then she could take her time and get to know them while making sure that they are kind and authentic before she's ever vulnerable with them. Making good connections is worth this risk. Anxiety wants you to be alone because it has so much power over you there. But there's nothing for you there but misery. Sometimes you hear influencers or adults or thought leaders or authors. You have to surrender control and then you could let go of anxiety. I never saw that going over well with someone who has control issues. My method allows you to be in control of the things that matter. your agency, your ability to make meaning and respond to a situation the way you want to. Knowing that you have your agency means you never have to give up the control that matters. So you don't have to grab anything to maintain it. Agency maintains itself. Letting go of control is letting go of attempting to control things you don't and will never have control over. It feels scary to let go, but not meeting those impossible expectations that you are in control just causes chaos. Deciding to focus on what you can control brings calmness. You don't have to grab anything. You don't have to effort more. You don't have to hurt yourself or anyone else to be in sustainable control. You just have to root into what you already have. Doesn't that sound nice? Let me give you an example of this. Dean is an 18-year-old who gets anxious about missing class, even if she's sick. This has been something that she has been worried about since she was little. She's worried that she'll feel out of control trying to make up missed work. It was not like she was never sick, but those few times when she was sick, her mother had to convince her to stay home. Each time, it went fine. There was far less work than she thought, and she caught up pretty quickly. In fact, in retrospect, she could say that it wasn't so bad. She knew how to ask the teachers for help or the classmates for notes and schedule time to make up tests and do missed work. It was never actually a problem. However, next time she was sick, the same anxiety of being out of control would come again. If Dean remembered and focused on what she did have control over, the ability to navigate communicating with her teachers and completing missed work, instead of focusing on, when I'm not there, I miss everything and then I'm behind. How am I going to catch up? What if I'm behind? She would feel a lot less anxiety. She can give up control over that all day long and feel more control in her life, not less. I know this was a simple, benign example. I don't want to give a traumatic example because they can distract you or worry you, or worse, they'll trigger you. This doesn't mean that it doesn't work with something more severe. You may all have contexts of unspeakable stress, oppression, and hardship much worse than Dean. If you do, then you have skills to keep yourself safe. If you didn't, you wouldn't be here listening to this. You have kept yourself safe. That means you've harnessed your agency and your control about the things that you can control. You need to make decisions to keep yourself safe. And we're going to get into those safety measures in the next chapter. But here we're leading up to that by talking about your abilities to assess your safety. One more note. In the book, I share the social identifiers of the characters in the stories I tell. I may not do that in this podcast because I'm being more explicit about diversity, equity, and inclusion in other ways. But I have to apologize for a misstep that I made in the book. I'm sorry that I used the word straight. Since writing the book, I was schooled about this word, and that feedback uncovered an implicit bias about the connotation of straight. Using the word straight suggests that it's preferable, but I don't think it's preferable. However, because I did not publish the book, I cannot change that now. I'm sorry that I used this exclusive term, and I hope to do better in the future now that I know better. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast, Anxiety, I'm So Done With You, with me, Dr. Jodi. Don't forget my 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and remember, every episode has a blog post with more videos and resources for you. It's time to read Chapter 2, line number 5. You shouldn't have to do it. Read or listen to that, and I'll catch you there.